Hey there, welcome to All 24 News World News Program. I'm your host Islam Sid, and here's what's making headlines tonight. President Abdelmajid Tebboune demands flexible aid policies and urgent action on Africa's debt, doubling down on Algeria's call for continental solidarity. Dozens killed as UNRWA warns 8 centers have become death zones. Over 130 groups are now urging a unified relief system to stop the bloodshed. Also in our news, Sudan's army fights off an RSF assault on Al-Fashir, declaring it a military zone. Meanwhile, the UN says famine looms for 4 million displaced Sudanese. And Kiev strikes a Russian military site, inflicting casualties, but Moscow hits back, claiming full control of Luhansk as their advance stretches into a third month. The details shortly. Welcome back to the program. Leading on news tonight is this breaking news. US President Donald Trump announced Tuesday that the Zionist entity has accepted the conditions needed to finalize a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza Strip. During this period, efforts will focus on ending the war in the Palestinian enclave. Trump shared the news via social media, emphasizing U.S. commitment to working with all parties involved. More on the Gaza file later on in our news. Moving on to other news, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune has called for a more equitable and pragmatic approach to international development aid, anchored in partnership and mutual respect, rather than imposed conditions. In a speech delivered on his behalf by Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi at the UN Financing for Development Conference in Seville, President Tebboune emphasized the need to revitalize global cooperation frameworks, enhance public financing, and recognize the complementary role of private investment in advancing sustainable development.
Excellencies, distinguished para construir un futuro.
We call for more flexible and realistic policies in the allocation of aid, ones based on partnership and mutual understanding rather than on dictates and preconditions. In the same vein, I would like to reaffirm the importance of strengthening international cooperation for development and promoting solidarity among nations, particularly by revitalizing the role of relevant international frameworks as inclusive global mechanisms for supporting development. I would also emphasize that, while private financing plays an important role, it cannot replace public development assistance. Relying solely on the private sector to finance development will not be sufficient unless it is accompanied by a strong international commitment to increasing public development aid and supporting the capacities of least developed and low-income countries.
President Abdelmajid Tebboune has urged immediate action to address Africa's mounting external debt, advocating full relief for the most vulnerable nations. He addressed or described the debt burden as a principal impediment to development, warning that constrained financing is severely undermining stability and progress across the continent.
The growing burden of external debt is one of the biggest obstacles holding back African countries. This calls for urgent global initiatives to address the debt crisis, particularly through decisive measures such as debt relief and, in some cases, full debt cancellation for certain countries.
President Abdelmajid Tebboune reaffirmed Algeria's steadfast commitment to Africa's development, anchoring its foreign policy in sustainable growth and international solidarity. He underscored Algeria's active role in promoting continental integration through major joint initiatives.
Algeria has made sustainable development and international solidarity two key pillars of its foreign policy, something clearly reflected in its ongoing contributions to development efforts across the African continent. In addition, Algeria is fully engaged in advancing continental integration through numerous joint and regional infrastructure projects. Currently, through the Algerian Agency for International Cooperation for Solidarity and Development, my country is actively supporting infrastructure, healthcare, education and energy initiatives in several African nations, with a dedicated budget of no less than $1 billion. Moreover, by adopting a financial policy based on mobilizing its own resources, Algeria has successfully freed itself entirely from the burden of external debt. This financial independence allows it to play an active role in assisting countries still struggling under the weight of debt.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez reaffirmed his commitment to deepening cooperation with Algeria across strategic sectors, particularly in light of current global challenges. Speaking on the sidelines of the UN Conference on Financing for Development, he conveyed his regards to President Abdelmadjid Tebboune and thanked Algeria for its high-level engagement in the forum during his meeting with Prime Minister Nadir al-Arbawi. Algerian Prime Minister Nadir al-Arbawi held talks Tuesday with his Egyptian counterpart Mustafa Madbouli on the margins of the UN Conference on Financing for Development. The two leaders discussed regional and international developments, chiefly the situation in Palestine and Gaza. He affirmed their commitment to advancing regional stability. They also explored avenues to strengthen bilateral ties, emphasizing the need to revive economic cooperation in line with the strategic vision of their respective heads of state. The Saudi ambassador to Algeria reaffirmed the kingdom's commitment to expanding investment in the Algerian market, citing the country's improved legal framework, rich resources and strategic location. In talks with Energy Minister Mohamed Arqab, both sides expressed readiness to enhance cooperation, particularly in energy, mining and renewables through value-added joint ventures. Marking the 63rd anniversary of Independence and Youth Day, Housing Minister Mohammed Tariq Bil-Arbi launched a nationwide housing distribution campaign delivering tens of thousands of units across all provinces. Yasin Akhtar reports now.
Algeria launched a major housing distribution campaign on Tuesday, delivering more than 192,000 residential units across all provinces. The initiative, led by Algerian Housing Minister Mohammed Tariq Bil-Arbi in the province of Jelfa, coincided with the country's celebrations marking the 63rd anniversary of Independence Day and Youth Day.
Today, on the occasion of the 63rd anniversary of Algeria's independence, the official launch was given for the distribution of 192,318 housing units of various types across the entire national territory. All these units are designated for vulnerable populations and those with low to middle incomes, reaffirming the state's unwavering social policy, which is based on never abandoning citizens or their basic needs.
During the event, the minister also announced the initiation of construction of more than 162,000 additional housing units under the framework of the government's 2025 development agenda. In addition, preparations are underway for the launch of the third phase of the ADL public housing scheme, signaling a continued commitment to a large-scale state-led infrastructure expansion, which includes 200,000 units, with technical studies already completed. He also revealed plans for 47 new urban centers in 38 provinces, aimed at addressing urban growth and population pressures.
The housing sector, which serves as a cornerstone in the path towards sustainable civil development, has become a key driver for the national economy, stimulating job creation and energizing contracts of various scales. This progress is thanks to the guidance of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune.
Between 2020 and 2024, the North African nation could distribute 1.7 million homes nationwide, all financed by the state, while pledging to deliver another 2 million units by 2029.
Moving on to the war in Gaza, at least 18 Palestinians were killed and 44 others injured Tuesday as occupation forces opened fire near 8 distribution centers across the besieged Gaza Strip, according to medical officials at a Shifa hospital. The victims, including women and children, were struck while awaiting critical food supplies at multiple locations in yet another deadly episode of the ongoing assault on civilians. The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza Strip reported Tuesday that Zionist forces have killed at least 600 Palestinians and injured 4,278 others in the ongoing attacks targeting civilians waiting for humanitarian aid since the launch of the US-backed distribution system. The ministry noted that these figures only reflect those transported to hospitals, warning that actual toll may be significantly higher. The United Nations has strongly condemned the targeting of aid workers by occupation forces in Gaza. UN Assistant Secretary General for Near Eastern Affairs Khalid Khayari called for an immediate and an independent investigation, stressing the need for accountability. Briefing the Security Council, Khayari affirmed that the UN will not participate in any aid mechanism that breaches the principles of humanity, impartiality, independence, and neutrality. UNRWA has issued a strong rebuke of the U.S.-Israeli aid delivery system, warning that distribution points in Gaza have become deadly zones rather than lifelines. In a statement Tuesday, the agency reported rising civilian casualties as Palestinians risk their lives for food, emphasizing that UNRWA remains the only entity equipped to deliver aid safely and protect civilians. It called for an immediate end to attacks on civilians and demanded unhindered humanitarian access.
The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warns that a complete collapse.
Civilians, especially the displaced, are being killed while searching for food at aid distribution points, which have turned into dangerous areas, threatening their lives instead of offering safety and basic necessities. The new Israeli-American mechanism for delivering aid to Gaza has become a field of death, where the vulnerable are directly targeted as they stand in long lines for food.
More than 130 humanitarian NGOs have urged the restoration of unified UN-led aid mechanism in Gaza, including the reinstatement of UNRWA. UNRWA Commissioner General Philip Lazzarini confirmed on Tuesday that the groups demanded an end to the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, accusing it of delivering nothing but starvation and bullets to civilians in the besieged territory.
The United Nations, including its humanitarian agencies chief, among them UNRWA, remains the only body capable of safely and effectively delivering humanitarian aid to those in need, ensuring safe, unobstructed, and unconditional access to aid is essential, as continuing to impose restrictions only deepens the humanitarian catastrophe affecting over 2 million Palestinians in the besieged Gaza Strip.
Zionist occupation forces launched a series of deadly airstrikes across Gaza Strip on Tuesday, killing at least 119 Palestinians and wounding dozens more, mostly women and children. In Gaza City, Civil Defense spokesman Mahmoud Basir reported 60 martyrs, including 11 children and 13 women, as occupation warplanes struck displaced civilians fleeing Jabalia, as well as the Zaytun and Tufah neighborhoods. In the south, Al-Quds news network confirmed 50 fatalities in Khan Yunis and Rafah, with Nasser Hospital receiving victims of strikes targeting forcibly displaced people, 7 of whom were shot while waiting for aid near the American-Israeli Aid Center. In central Gaza, 9 people were killed in multiple strikes, including 6 from a single family in Zaweda, 2 in a school sheltering displaced civilians in Al-Maghazi, and one in a Nusayrat camp.
كثفت قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي قصف.
Over the past 4 days and with time continuing to pass, the situation has intensified and the picture remains unclear in the Strip. Even today, at this hour, more than 50 people have been martyred in Gaza City, among them 11 children and 13 women, as a result of Israeli airstrikes targeting residential homes and gatherings of civilians in various areas of Gaza City. Perhaps the most tragic and devastating incident today was the massacre committed against several families in El Zaytun area, specifically on Kishko Street, where the Abu Samra family was targeted. Israel occupation forces struck a residential building consisting of 6 to 7 stories, completely destroying it in an intense assault.
The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza reported 116 martyrs and 463 injuries in the past 24 hours alone. According to preliminary figures, the ongoing Zionist assault has brought the total death toll to 56,647, with 134,115 wounded since the start of the aggression. Following a deadly settler attack in the occupied West Bank, a delegation of EU diplomats visited the targeted village on Tuesday, calling on the occupation authorities to take immediate action to curb escalating violence against Palestinians. Zahra Farjani reports now.
A week after the deadly attack by Zionist settlers on the village of Kafr Malik in the occupied West Bank, which left 3 young Palestinians dead and caused significant material damage, diplomatic representatives of the Palestinian Authority and a delegation from the European Union visited the site. Their visit aimed to witness the aftermath firsthand, offer support to grieving families, and strongly denounce the growing wave of violence and vandalism that Palestinians continue to endure with impunity.
Our first purpose here was to come as a visit of solidarity out of a feeling of humanity. We all seen what has happened a few days ago in Kafr Malik, and what we saw is saddening, but it's also revolting because it's unacceptable. We cannot accept pure violence for the sake of violence.
On the evening of June 25th, more than 100 settlers backed by occupation forces stormed the village. Homes and vehicles were set ablaze and gunfire erupted as Palestinians attempted to defend their community. This was not an isolated incident. It is part of an ongoing pattern of coordinated Zionist attacks targeting Palestinian villages across the West Bank, acts that appear designated to forcibly displace residents and seize land as part of a broader expansionist policy. Our message today is loud and clear. We will not be uprooted from our homeland. With the voice of every mother, every child, and from the European Union and the world that speaks of human rights and freedoms, we ask for our right to live. We want to live.
We have denounced that, and we are calling on the Israeli authorities to prevent these actions from happening and to bring to justice those violent attacks, the authors of those violent attacks, because this cannot remain unpunished.
Just a few weeks earlier, on May 21st, Zionist forces opened fire on a visiting delegation of European diplomats in the Jenin refugee camp located in the northern West Bank. The incident sparked condemnation from several European capitals and was seen as a clear attempt to obstruct international scrutiny of the daily violence unfolding across the occupied Palestinian territories.
Switching focus to the war in Sudan, the Sudanese army announced it had repelled the Rapid Support Forces attack on al-Fashir from the southern axis, just days after Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan agreed to a UN-backed week-long truce. The Sudan Liberation Movement, aligned with the army, declared al-Fashir a military operations zone and urged remaining civilians to evacuate immediately. Most residents have already fled the city, according to local reports. The World Food Programme warned Monday that a funding shortage could leave over 4 million Sudanese refugees in neighboring countries at risk of worsening hunger. Without urgent aid, those fleeing to 7 nearby nations, including Central African Republic, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Libya, face severe malnutrition, the agency said. Looking Eastern Europe now, 3 people were killed and 35 others injured in a Ukrainian drone strike targeting a military facility in Russia's Izhevsk region, according to local authorities. Alexander Brichalov, head of the Udmurtia Republic, confirmed that 35 people were hospitalized following the attack, including 10 in critical condition. The strike marks one of the most serious cross-border drone incidents reported in recent weeks. Russian media reported at least 5 civilians killed in Ukrainian attacks across multiple regions on Tuesday. A drone strike in Izhevsk left 3 dead, while Luhansk saw 1 fatality in a mass drone assault. Donetsk recorded 1 woman killed overnight. Meanwhile, Russian forces made their largest territorial gains since November, seizing 588 square kilometers in June, with Donetsk remaining the war's fiercest battleground, according to U.S. analysts. Moving on to a different matter. Participants in the International Forum on Colonial Crimes held in Algiers called for accelerated decolonization efforts across Africa and the establishment of a fully sovereign Sahrawi state. Nafi Ahmed Mohammed, secretary of the Sagia al-Hamra and Rio de Oro Workers Union, urged the international community to take concrete steps in support of colonized peoples, denouncing ongoing violations committed against the Sahrawi people by the Moroccan occupier.
A message to these generations is to continue that resistance, which is not only about the independence of these peoples, but also about the complete decolonization and fulfillment of the binding obligations imposed on the colonial powers in these cities. It was therefore an opportunity to expose the grave abuses, violations and crimes that the people of Western Sahara continue to endure, crimes that have been committed for decades. We are in fact speaking of a long history of colonial crimes in Western Sahara.
At the same forum, participants condemned France's ongoing restrictions on access to Algerian archives, stating that documents reveal colonial-era crimes against humanity and are vital for achieving historical justice.
What is happening now with the issue of the National Archives and similar matters is being treated as if it were merely a historical affair from the past, something to be examined, stolen and kept from being shared, as if it has no connection to present-day France or current events. They are deliberately hiding everything to prevent access to this archive, especially by Algerians. The Algerians themselves should supervise this archive, but France continues to block that.
More news stories in the News in Brief with Salman As-Sibna.
U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order lifting sanctions on Syria starting today. In a press statement, Trump said the decision supports U.S. national security and foreign policy objectives, affirming his country's commitment to promoting stability and unity in Syria. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in Sistan and Baluchistan announced it had foiled a sabotage plot targeting infrastructure and economic centers. According to Iranian news agencies, security and intelligence forces arrested 50 individuals described as terrorists and agents, killed 2 others, and seized weapons and ammunition, including US-made equipment intended for attacks inside Iran. U.S. President Donald Trump suggested on Tuesday that his efficiency department should review the subsidies received by Elon Musk's companies in order to save big amounts of money for the federal government. Trump's comments come after Musk, the world's richest man, renewed his criticism of the large U.S. budget bill on tax cuts and spending, promising to oppose lawmakers who supported it after campaigning on limiting public spending. Paris baked under a heat wave with temperatures near 40 degrees and a haze over landmarks like the Eiffel Tower. These cities in roofs now trap heat-making top floors apartments. Meanwhile, in Germany, construction workers, roofers and street vendors grappled with soaring temperatures, with many taking extra precautions to stay hydrated and safe as the mercury hit 37 degrees Celsius.
That's the end of our news program for tonight. For more updates, you can always check our social media platforms. I'm Islam Said. Thank you for tuning in. Till next time and take care.